This podcast was brought to you by Irrigation and Green Industry, the leading business magazine for landscape and irrigation contractors. For the latest industry news and the digital edition, visit www.igin.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bringing Water Life podcast. I am John Farner here again with Kyle Brown. Kyle,
Hey,
how
well,
are you?
yeah, thanks for having me back.
Our internet connection seems to be doing quite well with one another.
Yeah, yes, yeah. It is. It's a. You know, we're developing our style. We're getting our repartee down.
It's sometimes we'll have our meetings and either I'll freeze, like think the most like random way possible, or you're freeze, and it's like, oh my gosh. These are the trials and troubles that we have. Just one of them, a very small one during COVID-19 pandemic, right, is our internet connection freezing on us. So
my favorite part is when one of us freezes and then the other, it goes for a couple seconds in just that freeze frame, and then I don't know if it does this on your end, but occasionally it will just do like a little high speed like catch up to where you are currently.
Yes.
And it's like one of the 1960s TV show with the fast frame. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's
exactly
pretty great.
right. It's happened a couple times, actually. Hey, you know what? I'll take these problems over many others our world is facing right now,
Very true.
So I mentioned this earlier, but my wardrobe is regressing into that of a young teenager, wearing my hoodie and my Stranger Things hat. So that's what it's come to, Kyle.
I'm still at least I have a pocket on this shirt, so like I'm holding out as best I can.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your hat, though. It's good.
I love when we have guests on the podcast, and it's happened every podcast we've had so far. From Jeff to Brian, we had an ag podcast last week, and then we'll meet Michael here in a little bit. Every one of them, when I reach out and I say, "Hey, do you want to be on a podcast? What we're looking at doing? Just how many people listen? Kind of the goals and what it would look like." And they respond, "Sounds great. It's going to video because I'll dress up." And I'm like, "Don't dress up."
I'm gonna wear a tie next time. I don't know about you.
Go for it. Just as long as you're wearing pants, I'm good. Whatever you wear up top, I'm fine. I'm fine. We're not gonna do. We talked about Christopher Reeve's son is a correspondent for Good Morning America and had the unfortunate experience of not angled the camera quite properly and
oh my,
had a little leg showing there with lack of pants basically. So anyway, we are once again having a landscape-focused conversation, but this conversation really spans upon all sectors of really any industry. We've geared it a little bit towards turf, landscape, irrigation, but I think it's very relevant given the socioeconomic climate we're in right now, but also relevant to a lot of industries have large and small businesses associated with them.
Right, and especially, in this industry, realizing that even when you have, even when you're a smaller part of that industry, that you still have a responsibility and power that you can use to help support it. So
yeah, exactly. So today we have Michael O'Brien. Michael is with MOB Advocacy. It stands for Michael O'Brien. In case anyone was wondering, we'll go into that too in a little bit during our conversation. Michael and I have known each other a very long time. And we have become pretty good friends, actually, and see each other eye to eye when it comes to the importance and focus on state advocacy. And a lot of what we're hearing in the news right now nationally is what President Trump is doing, what Congress is doing with these stimulus bills. What comes next? Is there going to be a coronavirus task force briefing this afternoon? And as well as our industry, and I say our industry as the turf and landscape industry, knows full well is these decisions are being made at a state and even sometimes even more local than that.
Right.
And the importance of that advocacy and those connections to make cannot be stated enough. And, you saw in Ohio early on with the Wines office and his stay-at-home orders, and there was a lot of confusion there on who could stay home, who couldn't stay home, who had to stay home, who didn't have to stay home, what businesses were open and closed. Landscaping and irrigation was right in the middle of all of that in Ohio. I mean, it was, and there was a lot of confusion there, but having those relationships done up front and knowing the people involved and having your businesses have that connection with those people, it's very important.
Yeah, especially on the, as you mentioned, just the like intensely local level. Even, even if we're talking like in your county, it's really important to know who you can talk to about, what's going on there. And yeah, Ohio, we definitely had those situations where you needed to know who to stay connected with to find out where exactly do we stand here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's keeping those relationships is extremely important.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Without further ado, let's get off to Michael. Sound good, Kyle?
Sounds good to me.
Here's Michael O'Brien. Hello, everyone. We're back with Michael O'Brien of Mob Advocacy. Michael, how are you doing?
Very good. Thank you.
Good. We just had a pretty wild and wacky pre-conversation before I hit the record button. So I apologize in advance for anyone who's laughing. We'll try to carry some of that energy over to the official conversation we have. Does that sound good?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Some of it anyway.
Michael, how long have you and I known each other? It's been a while.
It's been a while. More than 10 years, I think.
More than 10 years? Yeah, I guess so. Now, your background, so you're with Mob Advocacy, which stands for Michael O'Brien. It's very original. Good job with that, by the way. It's I can see where that MOB came from. What did you do before that?
Before that, I ran the National, State, and Local Government Relations for RISE, Responsible Industry for a Sound Environment, where I worked with a lot of your members and partners.
Yeah.
And before that, I ran PAC and Grassroots. I launched a PAC and Grassroots for Molina Healthcare. And before that, I did state appropriations lobbying for an education nonprofit.
So your background is really in state government affairs, state relations, state advocacy. That's I mean, since I've known you, you've been pretty passionate about all of that and how important that is to any and all industries.
Yeah, I've been doing it for nearly 20 years, and I believe every organization, we put so much focus on federal lobbying and advocacy, but so much more impact on your lives and your businesses happen from the state level. And so we think it's important for every organization to participate at the state and local level as well.
So let's talk about that for a little bit. Let's take a time machine back. Take our time turners back to March 16th or so. That was that first week of stay-at-home orders. And I think it started in the Bay Area of California, San Francisco, that area, and expanded from there in a very, very fast way. Can you talk a little bit about you don't have to go into specifics if you don't want to, but what was your week like that week? What did you do in working with your clients and others? Were you surprised, taken aback? Like what was your week like?
We had seen it coming for about the week before that. We figured stay-at-home orders were coming, and we tried to be prepared and lay some groundwork for some governors that we knew would have some orders coming out. Virginia, Maryland, New York, California, Washington, all the places that had hot spots. And certainly some of the first people that called, we work a little bit with the Arts Council in North Carolina and some other organizations that do gig work. And so I had a lot of questions about individuals who were going to be left out of the unemployment process because the gig economy has no unemployment.
Yeah.
And then most of the associations that we represent small businesses and individual members. So we were focusing a lot on unemployment and those pieces during that kind of first week in terms of what are states doing, what's the federal government doing. I do so little federal government work, but we made a lot of phone calls and got some good analysis, and we're able to pass on good information to our clients about what was happening in their specific states.
Did you feel any of your clients were I think a lot of people were taken like off guard, but were they surprised at stay-at-home orders? Were they, did they feel like those were caught up in the closures, and that were they taken aback? Were they upset? Did they feel like, going after and suing the government? Like, what was the reaction among the folks you work with on the ground?
So most of the clients that we work with are based in places where they had hotspots. New York, DC, Chicago. So that to them reacting, they weren't surprised by stay-at-home orders to the extent of some of the dates that people were putting out. I think were surprising. In Virginia, I think they were very forward pushing. Governor Northam pushed to June 10th. And he's a doctor, so you have some hope that he knows what he's doing. So I think it was a mix. Some people, hey, stay at home is, you're shutting down too much, too long. And some people, if you were in New York or Chicago or DC, staying home, keeping students home, it was all important. I think the schools were kind of the precipice. Once schools started to shut down, I think most businesses realized that they were going to have to, in some way, shape, or form, figure out how to do stay at home for, just so parents could take care of their kids.
There was an article, I don't know if you saw this, Kyle, an article that was released either yesterday or today that Amy and I were talking about this morning about schools specifically. And I know my county school in Maryland, they announced on March 12th that they were going to be closed. And I think they started with 2 weeks. And at the 2 weeks, they were just closed. They're trying to figure out how do you do remote distance learning, what are the next steps. They treated them like snow days.
Mm-hmm.
But the impetus really behind schools, I mean, there's a lot of importance for public health with keeping the students as well as the faculty safe, but it shows the importance and allowed the cover for businesses to be that next step. And that's what this article goes into, is that the schools were the catalyst, and it says, hey, we're serious about this. Businesses are next. I don't know, did you see that, Kyle, or Michael, did you see that? Or
I didn't
come
across that.
Yeah. So
well, and the other part of that is that if the schools are involved, it's hard to run your businesses at the same rate with if schools are out. So it did let everyone know that basically, like, you really do we need to pay attention to this.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little about advocacy pre-COVID-19, during and after. Okay. And you and I have talked a lot about organization, having those relationships with governors and state legislatures. You and I are very involved in national organizations and regional organizations that focus on state affairs. Talk a bit about the importance of being organized and having those relationships leading up to these stay-at-home orders.
I think it was critical. We work all over the country. I've lobbied personally in 40 states, and we work very hard to make sure that we maintain our relationships internally, but also making sure that those relationships are also built with our clients, so our clients feel like they have some semblance of the relationship as well. It's not something that we solely own, and just in case something were to happen, if our clients either go with somebody else or go out on their own, they still have that basis, and we've helped them build that base. But it was certainly critical in terms of turning the corner, because having built up those relationships with face-to-face meetings over the last 20 years, when we needed things, we were getting answers. So North Carolina and Ohio and New York and Washington and Illinois, when our clients had questions about what was going on there, we were able to get answers. And it wasn't hey, I'll deal with this in 10 hours or tomorrow when I have a chance to breathe. But we were getting answers right back. They weren't always good answers, but at least we were getting answers. Hey, yes, you can do this, or hey, we can't deal with this right now, but we know that you're important, and we will deal with it as soon as we can breathe. So
It was about
you know,
kind
the
of keeping those
relationship
lines open.
building, we
Yeah.
call it being proactively reactive. You know, you've got to be able to be prepared for whatever's going to happen. And you know, in this case, it was a pandemic.
That is going to be the title of my next book, Proactively Reactive.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'll give you credit for it, Michael. I won't steal it.
There you go. I'll be the
There
fifth
you go.
Beatle.
There you
go. Kyle, what were you saying? What were you saying there?
Yeah, so that sounds to me like it's been more about keeping those lines of communication open, even if it's not getting the best information or even getting the responses that you want. It sounds to me like you were just busy trying to maintain those relationships and maintain that line of communication.
Absolutely. You know, we hope it's the best information in that, you know, it's the most
Right.
accurate information. Not always the best news, but you know,
right.
so
That's what
we were have a client that's trying to launch a business in Prince George's County, and working through the Prince George's County Economic Development Office. And you know, we started a couple weeks before COVID and had some meetings set up, and then you know, he's like, "So when's our next meeting?" Like,
Yeah.
June.
Good luck. Yeah. Well,
they're a little busy.
Yeah.
But
Like
you
Prince
know,
George's County, especially, that is, you look at the map of the greater Washington, D.C. area, Prince George's County is being hit really hard right now.
yeah, and so it's important to establish, you know, those the standards of what your clients can expect. You know, it's important for them to know, hey, how long is this going to take? You know, our original timeline we thought was 8 months, and that's going to be pushed probably at least another 8 at this point. So
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a good point, talking about working with the Economic Development Board and to where we are right now, and the importance of advocacy. What does advocacy look like right now? A lot of state legislatures are not in session right now for the fear that they would get sick themselves. And let's face it, I think state legislators trend younger than the federal side, but we're not talking about young, vibrant people here generally that are members of our legislative bodies, right? Is that a good political way of saying it? So
I'd say you generally have some really old people and some really young people, and there's not a lot. There's not a lot in the middle.
Yeah, there's not. That's right. So I know a lot of them, especially in the States, have taken to what we're doing now, a Zoom call with, you know, having some committee meetings and some meetings. I have two questions for you. Is any work getting done outside of COVID-19 policies and legislation? And two, what does advocacy look like? Are we still able to do any kind of grassroots lobbying and advocating on behalf of your clients, our industry, et cetera? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, you look at North Carolina, which kicked off their session yesterday. And their session kicked off closed, no lobbyist allowed. So, you know, you're not there in the building, obviously, if it's no lobbyist allowed. But you hope phone calls, emails, and grassroots, I think, are going to be very important over the next few weeks. You know, sessions didn't necessarily, some just stopped, but there's a good chunk out there that are just suspended until, you know, who knows what. We do know that fiscal years end June 30th, and that there's a whole lot of states that still have to pass budgets. So there's going to be some activity between now and June 30. But I think a lot of the real governing, anything that's important, is going to be pushed to the fall. I think a lot of states will come back in the fall and do some work. But you know, I think there's big issues that they're going to have to deal with. You know, realizing that broadband wasn't sufficient to support schools. You know, I heard in Arkansas they had to call up the state's public television networks to facilitate classes. So students were watching watching public television as opposed to, you know, Zoom and other pieces. So budgets, the education piece, obviously healthcare, unemployment. I think you're going to see a big push for unemployment reform. I think California had the big push with AB5 and gig workers. I think you're going to see a push for that in 49 states. And
So
it'll
go into that a little bit, because I'm sure our listeners don't understand what AB5 is. Can you just 30 seconds, broad view? What
Sure.
What AB5 is?
So AB5 is the piece that says, are you a gig worker or are you an employee? Are you a contractor or are you an employee?
So, for example,
And
a driver for Uber or Lyft, are you an individual contractor or are you an employee of Uber or Lyft?
correct. And in California, with the new legislation and the new test, most of those people are classified as employees, which is, you have seen the number of layoffs that Uber and Lyft had because of that, and the bulk of those obviously in California, where they had to bring the people on as employees. So you're gonna see those pushes in a number of states. I think it'll kind of mirror right to work. And in some states it'll pass, in some states it won't. But you'll see the legislation track, I think, in 49 other states over the next 18 months.
Interesting. Kyle, jump in. I have more questions, but if you have anything, jump in.
I did actually have a couple for you, and I sort of want to ask a little bit about, from our perspective in the landscape and irrigation side of things. I want to ask a little bit more about, in terms of advocacy and in terms of how people can, how would you suggest, the people who are on the ground right now, who are out in the field working, or waiting for the chance to get out and work. Well, I guess let's start off from that perspective right now. If you're in a situation where you are kind of like waiting for the chance to get out there, how would you suggest that you maintain that communication or connect with the people who are in charge of those things and kind of advocate for yourself, so to speak?
Yeah. So, read the information that comes out from your association. Most associations are having grassroots movements still. Take action. If your association is impacted by any of the federal legislation or the state budgets or local ordinances, make sure you get your voice out there. And use your association, whether that's the national association or state associations, to make sure that voice is out there. And if you have any kind of relationship with your Congress member or your state legislator or your city council member, those are important, and that kind of puts you at a different level of advocate. So make sure you're talking to them and telling them what your problems are, what's impacting your industry, because they're not experts in your industry. Only you are as an advocate. And so make sure you take any chance you have and say, hey, look, this is what's happening, this is the kind of help that we need, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I was reading a poll the other day, and I don't remember where it came from. I was looking for it while I was on a call, and I couldn't find it. But it said legislators are 80% more likely to listen to a small organized group than they are the kind of the general population of their constituents. So grassroots works, and if you are the small local voice, you have a lot of power.
So to follow up from that, if you are in a situation where you're trying to make your voice heard, what does that look like to you? Is that writing a letter? Is that making a phone call, or is that just or signing on with a group letter or something like that? Or what does that look like to you?
I think it's great. We recommend phone calls more than just about anything. I think it takes a little more buy-in than an email, and so I do think offices do spend time, even if they're just kind of checking the box, hey, what side are you on? um, it does mean something, but it gives you the chance to build a relationship. You might get somebody who's not just checking a box and actually takes the time to talk to you. And so, email, rarely do you get that chance because, hardly ever does somebody respond outside of some kind of form level letter.
Right.
But, a phone call, especially at the state and local level, you never know who you're going to get. And,
Right.
you could very well get the chance to talk to the actual legislator and decision maker. But you'll get people who will definitely take some time and listen and give you the chance to build that relationship.
Okay. And as oh, sorry, John. It
No,
looks
no,
like
go
you're
ahead.
ready
Go ahead.
to.
Go for it. Go for it.
Well, to follow up, just in one last thing there. Especially if you're a smaller business, you don't have a ton of weight. You have just a couple employees, let's say. Um, is it still worth your time? Do you feel to make a call like that, even though you don't have a lot of weight to throw around, let's say, or is this a situation where it makes more sense to look to your state advocacy groups or things like that, or how what does that look like to you? How would you approach that?
I think both are important. So,
Yeah.
as if you have 2 or 3 employees, you might not think that you have a lot of power,
Mm,
but we know that small businesses is the economic driver of the country. And so, if small business A and small business B and small business C and D and E and so on are all saying the same thing to the same
yeah.
people, that makes a difference. And your state association obviously has a bigger picture of the industry impact in your state or region or country,
Yeah.
and they can give a big picture. Hey, we have X number of jobs and spend this number of dollars and pay this much in taxes. Um, so I think you need both pieces of that, and they're
Okay.
both important. You can't really successfully do it with one or the other. Well, you can, but it's a lot easier when they're both working together.
That makes a lot of sense.
You can, but it's harder.
Yeah.
Um,
Michael, we heard a lot about the essential workers over the past few weeks, and I think this is all kind of flush itself out, right? I think that everything's kind of leveled off. People understand, can I work? Can I not work? Etc. Moving forward, how important do you feel this essential worker designation is going to be? I mean, we can't tell when the next pandemic is going to hit or the next, a world calamity is going to happen. But do you see this being a thing, moving forward in different states?
uh, you know, they're saying that this event wasn't a when or an if but when. So certainly you're going to see it again. How long, you don't know. But being classified as essential workers um, gives you some leverage in terms of state budgets. um, you know
Mm-hmm.
States are going to be cutting stuff, and
Yeah.
what are they going to cut? Well, if you've been declared an essential industry and an essential employee, it's a whole lot harder to cut that out of your state budget than it is for somebody who's not essential. um, so I think that's certainly important. And especially in the irrigation industry where lawn care is important for property values and property protection. um, Making sure that those pieces aren't left by the wayside and still
Mm.
included in city ordinances and say, hey, you know you can't just let your building go to crap.
Right.
um,
No, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
so I think it's going to be important, in all of the work that you guys did all over the country. I think is really going to pay off.
Yeah, we've been seeing it on the federal level. We are seeing a lot of in the next round of the COVID-19. It's gone from relief to like economic growth is what we're seeing. The transition of legislation here, And some of these programs may be geared towards that essential worker / critical infrastructure list out of the Homeland Security Department. So it's how important these guidance documents and how states designate you. It has long lasting ramifications.
It does. And, if you were an essential worker, you went out and did work, outside and with other people at times when, they were telling everybody else, hey, stay home and social distance and physically distance yourself from others. So, I think it's important to recognize the risk, that everybody did in terms of essential workers from, not just the healthcare workers, but, your maintenance, your irrigation maintenance in different pieces, your store employees and in the supply chain.
You look at, from the grocery store workers to sanitation. Like today's my trash day, so I just saw the trash truck go by. I mean, these people, and then your landscape maintenance crews, whether they're out there maintaining your lawn and landscape, or they're maintaining a backflow prevention device on your irrigation system, or they're ensuring there's no leaks. Everyone has a role to play here. And I'm not trying to say one more, obviously there's some more important than others, but at the same time, everyone's going out there trying to do what's best for our society, and they should be thanked for that. And it's tough no matter what industry you're in right now.
Right.
So, well, Michael, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Was that easy or hard or what?
It was, it's always fun to talk to you, John.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's
fun, really fun.
Extremely kind of you. Yes.
I don't know if you've said many different things to me in the past, Michael. Fun was not one of them.
On a less serious note,
but it's always been fun.
Oh yes, it has. Yes, that's right.
I have one question for you before we sign off, because now I'm curious. I think I want to start this as a tradition, from our last one. I'm sure, as people have been in quarantine and stay-at-home orders and everything else, you've probably been watching a lot of movies, a lot of TV.
Yeah. I was watching Homeland, the last season of Homeland.
I watched it too. That was awesome.
I didn't watch the end yet.
Oh, you didn't?
Halfway
Don't
through.
spoil it for him. Yeah, no. I just want to.
It's a good ending.
I want to ask. Okay, so top 3 things that you should be watching right now while you are in stay-at-home orders. What are the top 3 things if you had whatever you're working on, whatever, like movies, TV? What are the top 3 things people should be watching?
So I'm watching Homeland. I watched recently the new Jack Ryan. Finally got to that.
Oh dang! Okay, yeah.
I'm a little behind.
Yeah.
And I started watching documentary on Bobby Kennedy. So,
hey,
Irish Catholic kid, you gotta love the Kennedys, right?
Yeah. That's I think that's great.
My son just started watching the Michael Jordan, the 1990s Bulls documentary on ESPN. That looked pretty good. I'm gonna have to join him and watch that documentary. That looked pretty good too.
Yeah.
I have watched a lot of old baseball games. I will.
They're all. Yeah.
Hey,
sadly, no new baseball.
Hey, I know I'm wearing a Baltimore hat today, but this just means that the Nationals can be World Series champions for even longer.
Oh my gosh.
Am I right? It's all
another parade, right?
I think so. I don't think we need that many people in DC right now together for another parade. It's the last thing we want.
They're gonna just start running the league just through like old copies of RBI baseball streamed online.
That's what ESPN has.
Are you kidding? Oh well. No.
Oh, there's an NBA. There's NBA 2K20 tournament going on.
I heard
NBA
about
players.
that. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I
Baseball's
heard about
in the playoffs. I think Jeff McNeil from the Mets made it. I don't know how long.
Fantastic.
All right, Michael. Thanks a lot, buddy. I really appreciate it. I always do have a good time talking to you.
Anytime.
Maybe someday we'll be able to travel again together and enjoy our shenanigans once again.
One can hope.
One can hope. All right, buddy. Thanks. I really enjoyed that conversation with Michael, Kyle.
Yeah,
and he's a fun guy, and I love how you bring up TV shows at the end of all of our conversations.
Well, after the first one, we had to. Now I'm just curious. part of what we do here is we're helping people develop as better landscapers and business people, but we got to help you deal with the day-to-day stuff too.
From the day we started this little thing that masquerades sometimes as a podcast on a not regular basis,
Sure.
I've always said we've got to keep it entertaining. We have to. We want to be an escape that's also informative. And that is, believe me, I was in a conversation with some of our staff the other day, and we can watch the news. We can, go online and get into social media, and things get real dark real fast.
It can, yeah.
And and for our industry, it's the same thing. And you hear what's going on with different manufacturers and distributors and contractors and what comes next. It's scary. It's all these different things, right? But there are good stories out there as well. There's resilience out there as well. And there are things that excite me out there as well. And and this podcast, we just want to keep it entertaining and somewhat light without, and while still getting our points across. I appreciate that. It's something that's fun, and I think we should continue. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's either that or we ask when their next gig is, or if they want to promote themselves on social media. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Oh, I did forget to ask Michael what his website is.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's Mob Advocacy is his company. You just Google it, MOB Advocacy. He has his own website. Go to that, check him out. Like I said, he and I are good buds. I can vouch for him. He's great. I did want to talk a little bit about, before we wrap things up completely here and go to the music, I want to talk a little bit about the irrigation and green industries, COVID-19 coverage and your focus. I know you and I meet regularly with your team over at Irrigation and Green Industry, and you've talked to a lot of people on the ground about their experiences and how they're coping with, dealing with, working in this environment of during the pandemic. And you've also created a blog as well with just all kinds of information related to COVID-19. This is in addition to the Irrigation Association's resources that we've developed as well on our website. But do you want to talk a little about your blog and what you're doing over there at Irrigation Green Industry?
Absolutely, yeah. So the way that we've approached this, especially as this is something that is an ongoing issue, and people have, it's something that people are going to need to get regular updates on, rather than having it as a situation where you have to follow it through our daily news scroll and things like that. We've placed it at the top of the website, and you click through, and it's all of the information that we've gotten so far. Basically, what we've been doing is we've been adding new information to the top as it comes to light, as you and I talk, or as I come across news out in the wild. What I've heard from people out in the field as well. And we're trying to find the stories that are affecting the people in our industry the most. So not just the general COVID-19 issues, but really more the things that are going to impact you out in your daily work. So what we've been doing basically is going back through any kind of legislation that's going to be interesting to or that's going to affect the people working out in the field, and any kind of state advocacy or things like that we've seen as well. We do actually we always keep the links to everything that comes from the IA as far as the work that you do, John, and also all of the information that we've collected there on our resources page on the IA as well, because there's a lot of great information there. Not just what you guys are up to, but also just things that you can do or you can look at yourself as well.
Yeah, and I think that the IA, we're not the only ones that are doing great work in all this. Our partners at the National Association of Landscape Professionals, American Hort, specifically on the landscape side. The Outdoor Power Equipment Institute also has a resources page, and we try to link, we cross-reference each other all the time. And then your and my last conversation with Jeff Stone talked a bit about the Nursery and Landscape Association executives efforts, and we've linked a a link to the national map from that website and from the Irrigation Association's website, talking about the different state orders and what that means for nursery growers, garden centers, landscape contractors, et cetera. So there's the amount of partnerships and working together has been refreshing. And I think a lot of these successes that we've seen are because of those partnerships.
I was about to say one of the best things that's come out of this, and it's been a tough situation for many, many, many people, but one of the best things that's come out of it, and from our perspective, is really just building those partnerships and making connections, and even the different groups of people that we're part of this industry in a wider sense, helping each other out and really kind of lifting each other up, and I think that's really encouraging.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Kyle, that was fun.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Another week down, right?
I am up to record anytime. We can, you don't have to invite these other people on. We can just talk, but yes.
You're talking about the early days of the Bringing Water to Life podcast with me, Elizabeth McCartney, and Brent Meekum, all sitting around a table together. There was no video back then. Only lucky enough to see our banter back and forth with that. But yeah, maybe someday we'll just have a little half-hour conversation.
Sure. No, I'm glad to be a part of it. Glad to help.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kyle. Thank you for listening. It's Bring Water to Life.